Hi, let's talk about spring books. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel, I talk about books and writing. And today I'm going to give you a list of some of my favorite books to read to get spring vibes. Very appropriate that I'm filming this video today because it's literally snowing right now. I live in the north and March is very all over the place. And while we've been having pretty unseasonably warm weather this March, we are having a normal mid-March day. It's 30 degrees. It's flurrying. It's not sticking yet. And let's talk about some books that are going to make me at least feel like the seasons are changing, even though today feels firmly rooted in the end of winter. I have to first talk about some books that I've written that take place in spring and give you all the spring vibes. The first is Waiting for His Mate, which is the second book in the Wolves of Luven series. While the book starts in winter, we end in spring, and we have a fun spring equinox festival that happened in that book. This is a spicy paranormal werewolf romance. And then the third book in that series, Stealing His Mate, also takes place in spring, and that has a much more bucolic setting. You're in the woods, you're watching farms come back to life and the wildflowers bloom and spending time outside and on lakesides and all that wonderful stuff. So if you're looking for some good spring vibes with some heavy spice with wolf shifters, check that out. And then my newest book coming out, The Hedge Witch, which is coming out on May 14th, is a springtime paranormal romance. It takes place in May and it has all the witchy vibes you could want. It's on an island in New England, so you get that like end of spring, beginning of summer feel. And yeah, I hope you like all of them. Now let's go to some books that I didn't write. So every year I do a spring vibes video and I try to do different books in every video. But I will say that spring is probably one of the hardest seasons to find in literature unless you are recommending classics. And I've recommended a lot of Jane Austen and stuff in my past videos, so I'm not going to talk about those again. There's maybe one book, I think one book on this list that I have talked about before because it's just, I have to. So most of these are new. I will link in the description my video, at least from last year. I can't remember if I made one the year before or not. I'll have to check. And so if you want some other ones as well. The first book we're going to talk about is In a Jam by Kate Canterbury. This book does take place over, I think, an entire calendar year, but I feel like the vibe of the book is very spring. And that is because it is about Shay, who right away at the beginning of the book is left at the altar and then very soon after inherits her step-grandmother's tulip farm in rural Rhode Island. So it's taking place on a flower farm, which is very spring. And it's a friends to lovers, marriage of convenience story. Part of her inheriting the farm is that she needs to get married within 1 year. So she has this good friend, Noah. They were friends in high school, and he says, you know, we could just get married and then we could get divorced. You get to keep the farm. And he's been in love with her since high school, but they do it. And then slowly their relationship moves from there. I love this book. The second I read this, which I think was last June, I was like, I think this is the best contemporary romance I've ever read. It's very, very good. Next, I have two graphic novel series for you. The first is The Tea Dragon Society, and the second one is called The Tea Dragon Festival. And my second grader is reading this one right now, so her bookmark is in there, and so I can't let it fall out. But these are really sweet stories, and technically they take place over several seasons, not just spring, but the vibe of them is very springish. It's about this place that raises tea dragons, which are like baby dragons whose antlers produce tea leaves. It's super cute and cozy. If you're just feeling very like, I want to read a cottagecore graphic novel under a willow tree with wildflowers everywhere, these are the books for you. And I think they're technically adult. The reading level, it's a little hard for my second grader. Like I read them with her. I would say the reading level is probably more like 5th, 6th. The next graphic novel series is going to take me a while to pick up because it's a lot of books. Okay, this is so heavy. It's it's Lore Olympus. I'm going to set this down. So, oh my gosh, this is like, feels like it's like at least 10 pounds. Right now there are 5 out. The 6th one is coming out on like May 7th because it's coming out right after my birthday, and I always buy myself all the books I want to read in the summer on my birthday. I always buy a couple more in like June, and I usually don't buy books in July, and then in August I'll pre-order it so it comes. So this series is about Hades and Persephone. First of all, Persephone is the goddess of spring, so you get a lot of spring vibes from Persephone. The artwork in these books is my favorite thing about them. You've got the bright pinks, the dark blues. So the pink kind of represents Persephone and the dark blue represents Hades. And there are some great scenes, in particular this one, where Persephone is in like her old life. So she's being like a goddess walking around meadows and stuff like that. You get some like old school ancient Greece vibes as well, Greek gods and goddesses. This is very much a slow burn, very much. I'm on book 5 and I think they kissed 1 time so far. So, you know, be prepared for that. But they're beautiful, they're addictive. You can read them literally in like 40 minutes. And I try to like read them slowly so I can enjoy every single page of artwork because it is so unbelievably beautiful. But you definitely get that like spring feeling of renewal and the pastel colors with Persephone. And it's just a beautiful series to get lost in. Okay, so now we're gonna move into more like just like straightforward adult. The first being a book I'm currently reading, so I haven't finished it yet, and it's I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. I'm only 1 chapter in. I decided this March I wanted to read the section that is entitled March, which is the first, I think, 67 pages. Yes, and then the next section is called April and May, so I'm gonna try and read the sections as they go. And in the first section, I didn't necessarily get a ton of spring vibes, but I've been told and read it on 1,000 lists that this is a great spring vibes book to read. So it's a classic. Right now, we're following Cassandra, and we've met her sister, Rose, I think, and her father's current wife, Topaz, and they are bemoaning the fact that they are destitute, yet live in a castle, and Rose is very dramatically saying she's gonna go to London to sell her body so they have some money. And it's been kind of funny so far, so I've been enjoying it. Next is a book I know I put on the list last year, but honestly, I think I'm gonna have to put this on every list. I'm sorry, not every list, every spring vibes list, because it's Wayward by Amelia Hart, which first of all has the most spring cover I think that's ever existed in the history of time. This is a magical realism, and it has some pretty dark content warnings in here, which I'm just gonna real quick go through with you. There is on page sexual assault. There is on page domestic violence and abuse. There is on page like historical abortion. So like very unsafe, very, is this woman gonna survive? I think there's some torture. It might not be on page though. So there's a lot of stuff in here, and you should probably go to the author's website to read the entire list just in case I forgot something, because it has been about a year since I read this book. We have 3 narrators, Kate, Violet, and Altha, and they're from the same line. And Kate lives in 2019, and she is escaping her abusive husband. And Violet lives during World War II, and she's living on a like Lord Lady estate. I never know what to call those. Like those British estates where nobility lives during World War II, and her father does not want to talk to her, and no one will tell her about her mother. And then Altha lives in 1619, I believe. Yes, and she is awaiting her witch trial. And all of them have this sort of strange affinity for birds and bugs to listen to them. So you get some magic in here, but it's definitely magical realism and not straightforward fantasy. And it definitely has all the spring vibes you could want. The next one I have for you is The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. And this, again, takes place on a flower farm. So this one is fantasy though. I think that it's just straightforward fantasy. I wouldn't call it magical realism. And in it, we have June, and she is from a long line of women who either disappear or lose their minds. Her grandmother has just, at the beginning of the book, passes away, and June's mother was someone who disappeared, and June is in her early 30s, and she has started to feel like she's going crazy because she is seeing this red door, and she is hearing things that she knows aren't real. So she's going to the doctor about it, and she's kind of panicked about it, and then this family friend who has known her family for her whole life comes up to her and says, you need to go through the door. And she does. And I'm not going to ruin anything else for you because this was a really, really well-written fantasy, and it's kind of a quiet book. You're not going to be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, it's a really character development book, a really like, why do people make the choices that they make, that type of book. I loved it, and you get good spring vibes as well. My last just straightforward adult fiction book before we move into some other stuff is The Red Garden by Alice Hoffman. And this is kind of an odd recommendation for spring, I would say, because it takes place over all seasons and over 200-ish years. Now I'm trying to remember exactly what year do we start in? Let's check. So we start in 1750, Yeah, so over 200 years, because we definitely end past the 1950s. And each chapter is a different story of a family who settled this town where the Red Garden is, so in a different generation. So you jump through time by following these families who are like founding families of this town in, I think we're in like Western Massachusetts. And it's very, very beautiful. And some of them are extremely sad, and some of them will haunt you, and some of them will just make you really think. And it's so weird. There's a lot. So do you ever, sometimes I feel like when writers write the simplest line, it can be so effective. And there's one in here that I literally think about constantly. And that's that one of the men who's a narrator is grieving the death of his younger brother. And he's a young man. He's probably like 19 or 20. And he says something like, he died of an ear infection. Who dies of an ear infection? And like, that just like stuck with me because my kids get ear infections all the time. One has one right now. And so I always think about that line, like such a simple line, but it just so like humanized and connected that character, particularly to me, since I have a child who gets chronic ear infections, that like that was a fear before penicillins were founded and invented and all that. This is really beautiful. This is another one of those books that you could probably read in one day. It's a little long for that. It's over 250 pages. I feel like 200 to 250 is the sweet spot, but you will definitely read it in 2 days because you'll just get sucked into the story. Alice Hoffman's the queen of making you care about characters so quickly. That is her superpower. Okay, so we're going to go in a little bit offshoot of direction, because when I was really thinking about books with spring vibes, I feel like it's one of those, it's like the least written about season, with the exception of classics. So you look back and you think, oh, books about spring, that's like all of Jane Austen's books minus Northanger Abbey and probably Persuasion have a very spring vibe. I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith has a spring vibe. What's it called? Wives and Daughters has a spring vibe by Elizabeth Gaskell. So a lot of, older classics, we get that really like spring feeling. I don't think as many modern books are being set in spring. I feel like a lot of books are set in autumn, and then you get like the winter thrillers, and then you get like the summer beach reads, but spring is kind of like an in-between season. So when I think about like when I have a day or like an afternoon where I just really want to like immerse myself in spring, I tend to gravitate more to these kind of books. So let me start with The Complete Brambly Hedge, which is technically a kid's book and one of my twins' favorite book in the world. I literally just grabbed this out of the car because we've had some long car rides, and this is what she always brings in the car because it's obviously quite long. But the whole book doesn't take place in spring, but you have, here you can see the table of contents. So the first one is the spring story, then you have the summer story, the autumn story, the winter story, the secret staircase, the high hills, the sea story, and Poppy's babies. And my kids' favorites are Poppy's babies and the sea story are their two favorites, which both have springy vibes. Poppy's babies has like June vibes, but the pictures are so beautiful in here. And you really get from a lot of them this like wonderful English countryside aesthetic / vibe. And they're very sweet stories. We read all these quite often. And then there's also like a really old school, I think it was a BBC production or maybe a PBS production from like, I think the 80s, where they did like a stop motion with little critters it's wonderful. Whenever my kids are sick, I just put one of those on because they adore it. If you have a child, grandchild, a child in your life who likes cottagecore, or even like an adult in your life who likes cottagecore, definitely get The Complete Brambly Hedge. Next, I have The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady. And this is really cute. I've been reading this extremely slowly. So I'm on the May chapter right now, but it's this woman's journal that was recently found. Like it had been like a family heirloom, and they recently decided to publish it. But it's every month. She just kind of writes what's going on, and she illustrates what her farm looked like at the time. And she writes like quotes she liked, and she goes through, like has a calendar, and she doesn't write every day, but she kind of talks about what sort of is happening around in the farm and in her life. And then she illustrates the wildlife, and it's really, really pretty. And I would say the best months are the spring months. I mean, I haven't read summer or fall, but the spring months have been really fantastic to read. It's just a beautiful book. Right now, I took it down, but right now it's living on my mantle as like a display piece because it's so gorgeous. I haven't put out my spring decor yet except for my birds. I'll probably do that this weekend. So then you'll see a beautiful spring mantle in a coming video. Next, I grabbed my favorite floral book to look at, and that's A Year in Flowers by Floret Farm. My mom gave me this for my birthday, I think 2 years ago. And then I started following this woman on Instagram. And if you are a flower person, which I am, I heartily recommend, if you don't want to buy this book, at least follow her on Instagram, because her pictures are gorgeous. And she also sells like bulbs and seeds, which are kind of expensive. So I haven't treated myself to any yet, but one of these years I'm gonna buy her daffodil bulbs because her daffodils are gorgeous. They are so beautiful. And so this is probably the one I reach for the most this time of year when I want to just be like enveloped in flowers. I grab A Year in Flowers by Floret Farms. And then the last book I have in this section is The Cottage Garden by Christopher Lloyd with Richard Byrd. And I just got this like at my town's used book sale that I go to. And it's just like this old school cottage garden book. And my dream is to turn part of my yard into a cottage garden. I was supposed to do it last year and I didn't. And so this summer I'm gonna work a little harder. And obviously it's like turning a section of your yard into a cottage garden is a large undertaking, and I'm not gonna do it in a year because I also have to see what survives. But like I did a little bit. I've got a rose bush that was here when we moved in. I planted a plum tree, which is getting quite tall. And I planted a miniature boxwood, which we had brought with us from our old house. And what else did I put over there? I put a juniper tree, I put a miniature spruce, and I planted a ton of lily bulbs and they just never came up. And I was very upset about that. But I always plant zinnia seeds over there, but I'm gonna try to put in a couple more perennials to sort of build it up a little more so I'm not constantly putting seeds down / annuals every year. But maybe it'll get really gorgeous and I can maybe film in front of it. We'll see. I don't want to jinx myself. And lastly, whenever I think of spring, like how, you know, dark academia kind of goes hand in hand with September, October, and November, I feel like light academia really lends itself to not here March, but like where it's nicer, March, April, and May. And so I try to think about like when I'm feeling in a light academic mood. A lot of people read poetry, which I didn't grab any of my poetry books down, but like Emily Dickinson is a favorite of mine, or art books. So this past year, I want to say I started this in maybe like, actually it was probably like last summer, I decided I wanted to build up my art book collection a little bit more because I love a coffee table book. I like to sit on my couch and grab a coffee table book and look at it for an hour and then set it down and not necessarily be reading, but just be like enjoying the pictures. And I think it's also a really good way to not constantly be scrolling through Instagram because yes, there's a lot of beautiful content, like pretty pictures that give us a boost of, is it serotonin or dopamine? I can't remember. The thing that makes us happy. I don't remember which one it is. But I don't like to always be scrolling on my phone, and like my kids get a little crabby if I'm always looking at my phone, but like if I'm looking at a book, they'll come sit next to me, we'll look at it together. So I grabbed some of my art books that I've been building up. And I'd say if you want to do this, the best way to do it is to find a used bookstore. So I usually go to Half Price Books. Some of these I got from the used bookstore that my town has, and one of these is a new book that I bought as a special treat for myself. But I have a list of artists and I keep this list in my phone. So if I ever find myself at a used bookstore or at a estate sale or anything, I can always kind of like flip through it and be like, oh, I haven't bought a Degas book yet, which is one that I'm currently on the prowl for. But here's what I've gotten recently. I got this one, the Van Gogh, at my town's used bookstore. And my husband and I really both love Van Gogh. He went to school in the Netherlands and we went to the Van Gogh Museum together. And I'm just, you know, I really love the Impressionists, which I would say is probably because I took French for most of my life. So we studied a lot of Impressionism and I find a lot of joy in it. But, you know, just grab yourself. This, I think was, let's see if it's got the price on it still. This was $3 and it was originally $11.95, but I got it for a very good deal. And just to look through it. And also it's kind of fun. Like I've found, I have a lot of large oversized books like this that people are always like, why do you need those? Okay, so this is a tangent. Earlier this year, my son had to make a PowerPoint presentation about early American cultures. Like in Latin America, he had to do something about the Aztecs, the Incans, and the Mayans, and he needed images. And I have a book that I can't reach right now because I'm totally blocking it. I have this old set of Time Life books that were my grandfather's, and no one in my family wanted them. And I was like, please, I will take them, because they were in Michigan, so I had to drive to get them. I don't live in Michigan. And there's a book that's just called Early America. And we got so many cool images off that. And then he got to tell his classmates and his teacher, like we just took pictures of them, I didn't want him to cut them up, that they were from his great-grandfather's book. So long-winded to say books are history. Keep your books. Okay, other art books that I've gotten and loved. I got this one from Half Price Books. It's Japanese wood blocks, and I think this is just like a museum collection. So I really love this style of art, especially the landscape pictures. So this is another fun one. Also, this is a nice size coffee table book. I'm always like thinking about kids, that if you have a person in your life with small hands, it's not too hard to handle, because it's kind of like half the size of a normal coffee table book. So like it's more accessible for a kid to flip through. That's like my favorite, those wave pictures. I love depictions of water in art. And then of course I have Monet, Seasons of Light, or Impressions of Light. Monet is my favorite artist of all time. I mean, I do really like Degas also, but I think Monet wins. And you know, sometimes you just want to sit and look at some beautiful Impressionist paintings and enjoy them. This book I had up as a display book on my mantle, I think last July or June, in the spring at some point, just to get some good vibes going. So beautiful. And the last art book I have is my new one, and it is The History of Tarot Art, Demystifying the Art and Arcana, Deck by Deck, by Holly Adams Easley and Esther Joy Archer. This is like so cool because I've got it like, has a sleeve. And if you notice in my background, this was on my mantle, I think for January and February. I just took it down, but here's the cover once you get it out. And these are the two who do the Wildly Tarot podcast, which I absolutely adore. And basically they go kind of chapter by chapter looking at different decks and tarot art and kind of the history of tarot art. And it's really cool. I have not read the whole thing. I've read bits and pieces of it and been enjoying myself with it. Also, it comes with, which I left them in here because I don't want to take them out because I'm worried my kids are going to steal them. But it comes with some cards, which is very cool. They're very cool art. Those back in. Can't have my children stealing them. Am I right or am I right? So if you are interested in either art or tarot, I really recommend this book. And that is all I have for you today. So some graphic novels, some fiction, one romance, a lot of art books, and a lot of flower books, because I mean, when you ask me like what my loves are, it's like books and writing, gardening. And then lower than that is like art and knitting. So there's always gonna be flower books on my spring vibes list. If you made it this far in the video, please in the comments, let me know what your favorite book is to read when you just wanna feel like spring, or if there's one on your TBR that you're so excited to read. If you've made it this far and you don't wanna write words, we are officially out of winter. Snow be damned. So give me an emoji of your favorite flower. Tulips, I don't know what, like tulips really the only one I feel like you can tell, and sunflower, but the other ones are just kind of like general pink. But whichever one speaks to you, or whichever like green leaf or anything speaks to you, any nature emoji that makes you feel spring, feel like spring, please post it in the comments for me. I hope you have a wonderful spring full of wonderful books. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.